Well, thank you for all coming out tonight. I know it's a Friday night and, it's Miami, and there'll be plenty of time to get to the clubs down on the beach, so I'll see you all there. So ping-pong diplomacy, as Mitch just said, it's this extraordinary moment in 1971 when this deeply ingrained antagonism that had existed for 22 years between Mao and China and the United States suddenly fractured, and it all seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. And the story goes that it was these ping-pong players who started the process rather than politicians. And the press loved it because it was this spontaneity, and it was almost too good to be true. It was a story of a young American who befriends a young Chinese, and together the two guys start this process that literally changes the world. That's what we were taught. If you know anything about ping-pong diplomacy, that's probably what you know. It's a pack of lies. It falls very neatly into what everyone wanted you to know. It falls very neatly into the Kissinger and Nixon narrative. It fell very neatly into the Mao and his premier Zhou Enlai narrative, but it's not the full story. And this book is about the full story. So I want to start off way at the beginning and tell you, I want to present 3 different vignettes that I want you to hold in your heads. They're very different, but they will all be connected. So first of all, if you would imagine a sort of Downton Abbey setting. It's 1908, and there's a young boy standing there. He's 4 or 5 years old, and he's going to be a communist revolutionary, but at the moment, he's dressed in black velvet suit with frilly silk ruffs and patent leather shoes, and he's trying to get to the window, but his nanny is holding him back in this huge house in Kensington in London, and she's trying to comb his hair. And he wants to get to the window because he knows that someone special is coming to tea. The Princess of Wales is coming to tea. And he's very excited because he knows they're going to be golden carriages and they're going to be 12 white horses, just the right things for a 4 or 5-year-old boy to see. So he rushes downstairs and he sees his mum and dad and he sits down, and this woman comes in wearing a brown dress, and they have tea, and then she leaves and she gets into a motor car. And then he turns to his mum and goes, "Where's the princess?" And she goes, "Well, that was the princess." And he feels a deep, deep disappointment. And that disappointment will actually be returned when the Princess of Wales becomes the Queen. And she will write a note of condolence to his mother, not because he's died, but because he's done something even more unforgivable in British society. And that's he marries not one class beneath him, but 2 classes beneath him. And the headline sweeps the nation: Baron's son weds secretary. And it doesn't just sweep the nation, it ends up on the front page of the New York Times. It was considered that much of a shock. Now, we're going to jump. Second vignette I want you to keep in your head is of 2 40-something Chinese men. They are in a cave in central China. It's a big cave. Between them is a ping-pong table, and they're playing ping-pong. It's the 1930s. One of them has a slightly withered arm, and he broke it in a horseback accident. And his doctors told him that the best thing he could do was play ping-pong every day of his life. And that's what he's doing. Even more strangely, they're playing during an aerial bombardment. The cave is literally shaking as this game goes on. Third vignette. I want you to imagine an American hippie. He's got up at 4 a.m., he's sneaking out of a hotel. He's not just in any hotel, he's in a hotel just to the side of Tiananmen Square. He's the first hippie who's ever stepped into China. He escapes with a friend. They go wandering through the streets. They've broken away from all their minders, but still, in the middle of this very, very early morning, a crowd starts following them. Him and his friend decide that since everything's communist in China, what they're going to do is just borrow a bike. Now, as they go to borrow a bike, they can tell the crowd doesn't like it. So they pull the bike, they look at the crowd, they look back, they start to get on it, and the crowd starts moving towards them, and they realize they're about to get into trouble. They dump the bikes, and they sprint back to the hotel. Now, those 3 vignettes are really the beginning, the middle, and the end of ping-pong diplomacy. And what they're going to show us is just how political this game was from its birth, which is something nobody knew in 1971, and no one's spoken about since then. That first young boy who becomes a communist revolutionary, goes by the name of Ivor Montagu. Actually, he goes by the name of the Honourable Ivor Montagu because his father is called Lord Swathling. It's a hereditary title. The two Chinese men playing ping-pong during the aerial bombardment are Mao Zedong and his premier, or future premier at that point, Zhou Enlai. The American is this young free spirit called Glenn Cowan. He's born in California, not really doing much of anything, decides to get into ping-pong, somehow gets invited to join the American team for the World Championships in Japan, and 2 days later, boom, he is one of these spontaneous diplomats who's roped into Beijing out of the blue, who become front-page news on every newspaper in the world in the early 70s. Now, what I want to talk about for a second is why this book's relevant. I don't think we have to concentrate very hard to know that China has come a long way in the last 40 years, and this Sino-US relationship is more important than ever. It is, of course, the only country with a template for an empire. They've been there before, they've done it before. Up until the 1800s, China was the richest nation in the world and had been for a very long time. It's very hard to imagine other empires recovering anytime soon. You can't really see Athens getting their stuff together. You probably can't see Rome coming back anytime soon. And even, I don't think England's got much of a hope in hell either. But the Chinese have been here before. They made a lot of big mistakes to fall as far as they did, and they made a lot of big mistakes getting back on their feet again. Most of those were implemented by Mao. But they've been on the right road generally. There's still some huge problems there. And what are the Chinese intentions? Well, if someone tells you, the answer is nobody knows. There's this whole industry of commentators and authors who make a living on commentating on what might happen in China, and the only reason that's possible is because we just don't know. The best metaphor I ever heard for it was if you take two tiles and a bunch of putty, if you squeeze those tiles together, what we know about China are the little bits of putty that squeeze out along the side. And that's probably just about fair. But if this relationship is so important, and don't forget, all these nations that China is sort of maneuvering around right now, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, these are all nations we have defense treaties with. We're in this. And just to complicate matters, the Chinese also, of course, hold $1.2 trillion of our debt. So it's a very important relationship. So maybe it's worthwhile having a very close look about how this relationship really started in '71. But the real question is, why ping-pong? Ping-pong diplomacy. This, I thought, occurred to me in 2008 when my in-laws were kind enough to invite me to Beijing to go to the Olympics. So I went along and we were wandering around, and one of the fun things to do is look at some of the more unloved sports. But of course, ping-pong is not unloved in China, but it was great to go in and watch it being played so seriously. And what you realized even then was that it was about gold, it was about sort of nationalism, but it was about acceptable face of nationalism. And if you are a journalist or in that trade of any kind, when you walk into these stadiums, you're given a big bunch of papers with lots of information just in case you want to go and write about that fantastic match between Uganda and Ghana in the corner. And the very first fact on that page was that every week in China, 300 million people will play ping-pong at least once. Now, if you've ever been to China, you know one thing. China is a top-down country. It's not a bottom-up country. So that means someone at some time made this decision to tell everyone to play ping-pong. It's a very strange idea, but it's true. I mean, you think of all the things they could have told them to do, right? You could have had a nation of weightlifters or sharpshooters, but no, it was ping-pong. So why would they do that? You know, I'm English. The English love their sports. At the height of the English Empire, the English were codifying and exporting sports at an incredible rate. Everything from cricket to soccer to rugby to hockey. These are all English sports. But the Chinese decided to concentrate on ping-pong. So I asked the first Chinese I met who knew a thing or two about it, and I said, well, how did that happen? And he went, oh, don't you know, it all starts off with an Englishman, and his name is Ivor Montagu. So I went back and I started digging and went, well, I wonder who this guy was. How on earth did he get to China? Why did the Chinese listen to him? What's going on here? Now, the first thing you know about, or